businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. With Mardi Gras over, the next biggest parade may be of candidates running for mayor of New Orleans. We'll look tonight at who is expected to join the march. We'll also examine a new housing complex for Central City, federal resistance to helping tornado victims, a Louisianian who may head FEMA, a study linking crime with police presence, and the last echoes from this past carnival season. In our court are tonight's Informed Sources: Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Mike Pearlstein, investigative reporter, WWL-TV Channel 4; Jessica Williams, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate; and Stephanie Grace, columnist, The New Orleans Advocate. Let me go to Stephanie first because, okay, carnival's over. Now it's time to start thinking New Orleans politics.
The next thing, the next big party.
Yes. And there's the election this fall for mayor and for council.
And some other offices, yes.
Right, and so we're starting to see some people starting to either think about it or just about,
But they're kind of starting to show their hands a little bit. And remember, we're on a different schedule than we've been in recent history. It used to be that, remember, we had all those elections right at Mardi Gras and during the Super Bowl and everything. Those days are over. It's now in the fall. So the primary is in October. Qualifying is in July. So that's really not that far off.
Not at all.
And we don't have announced candidates yet, but there are people who are starting to act like candidates and starting to not act like candidates. So in the acting like candidates category, I'd say LaToya Cantrell, the city councilwoman, who has sends out these emails to her supporters every now and then that really let you know what she's thinking, even though she hasn't said it officially. Fundraising and letting billboard. She says that's not her, but her name is on
there,
it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, LaToya at any rate, yeah.
There's Walt Leger, I think, is probably going to tip his hand pretty quickly. He's in the legislature. He was waiting for the special session to end, and it's now over. And I think probably before the regular session starts in April, we might know something. He is talking to a lot of people and taking real steps towards exploring this. One candidate who a lot of people have talked about who probably was not really doing that is Jason Williams from the city council. Early on, it kind of looked like he might be a real contender in the race. Now, the thinking is that he probably will run for re-election to the city council.
Council at large.
Council at large, yes. So, which has some, downriver implications for people who are looking at that seat. Michael Bagnaris, the former judge who ran last time, is looking at it. Troy Carter, who had been on the city council way back and remember ran for mayor in that Ray Nagin election, just got back into the state senate. He's looking at it. Who am I forgetting?
Sidney Torres.
Sidney Torres, of course.
Yes. His own campaign and has said that he won't make a decision until the final 10 minutes before qualifying ends.
And yet, he's everywhere these days. He has this new reality show that debuted this week. He's also on billboards, but advertising the reality show.
The Deed.
The Deed. It debuted this week. It's a real estate show where he gives advice and money to people who get themselves into trouble, who get themselves into a lot of debt. It's interesting.
The kind of name recognition that any politician would love.
He does, and he doesn't have to make a decision because, as Jessica said, he can self-finance. He doesn't have to start raising money. And I think it's worth noting that getting in early is not necessarily a plus historically in New Orleans races. The last three mayors have gotten in very late: Mitch Landrieu, Ray Nagin, and Mark Morial. Morial and Landrieu, of course, were already very well known when they got in. Ray Nagin is more maybe from the Sidney Torres camp as he got in. He was the outsider, but we've alternated back and forth between insiders and outsiders. So if Sidney Torres is looking at this, he might be looking not just at what happened with Donald Trump, but that he might be following an insider.
Right. A few other names for mayor: Karen Carter Peterson, Desiree Charbonnet.
Right. Karen Carter Peterson has been out there for a long time. She hasn't said what she's doing, but probably not at this point, I would guess, because she was just elected over the weekend to a big new spot at the Democratic National Committee. She's, of course, the chair of the state Democratic Party, has been involved in national politics. So she's now going to be, she replaces Donna Brazile, another New Orleanian. She will be the vice chair of civic engagement and voter participation. These are very big things for the Democrats right now. That's going to be a big job. So I don't see that happening
and
at all.
J.P. Morrell, too.
J.P. Morrell, Desiree Charbonnet, a judge looking at it. J.P. Morrell, state senator, probably wouldn't make a decision until after the regular session.
Isn't the conventional wisdom that Walt Leger and J.P. Morrell would not run against each other?
It is. They're very good friends. So, but they have said not necessarily. So, but I think the thinking is it would be unlikely.
I want to mention, though, that although the election date has been advanced, the day in which the current term's end has not been advanced.
Because
so you
Mitch
can have,
was
you can have a really
elected under the
long,
old
lame
system.
duck period. Assuming the next mayor and council are elected in October or November, depending on runoffs, they're going to be there until the incumbents can be there until next May.
May of 2018.
And speaking of council, we should run through that a little bit too, because there's some news on the in the other at-large seats. Susan Guidry, the district councilwoman from District A, announced this week that she would not be running. She had been looking at it. Helena Moreno, the state representative, has been looking at that seat for a long time.
And she said that she intends to make an announcement on that point at some point within the next week.
Helena Moreno
one
does,
way or the other.
And so for at-large, to clarify, too, there are two different
separate
positions.
elections,
Okay.
so you qualify, you declare for one or the other. Right now, Jason Williams is holding that other spot, so if he runs, it's interesting, there had been some other people looking at running for that, so they, district council members, so they might run for re-election, which will preclude some other people who were hoping to get in. One thing you're seeing is a lot of members of the legislature, it's really tough up in Baton Rouge these days, and, with all the budget situation and the constant sessions, I think you're seeing a lot of people in the legislature looking at other jobs like
also,
city
legislators
council.
don't need to give up their seat to run for the
That's
councilman,
true.
so they have nothing to lose.
It's a different
In
cycle.
Guidry's announcement, in a sense, the way it was worded, she said two things. She said she wasn't running for at-large, which she would have been eligible to do, but she also is not eligible to run for a district seat. And so in effect, she said, I'm not running for the council at all.
retiring.
I think she made it clear she's retiring
She's
from
retiring.
politics. I'll give you one outsider name,
Yeah.
somebody who's been eyeing it just in the exploratory phase, is the former police chief, Ronald Surpass, now a Loyola professor, looking at one of the at-large seats, really capitalizing on the fact that crime and police are one of the big priorities.
We're just starting the
Yeah,
season,
that would be
so
interesting.
more names I'm sure will be dropping in and dropping out. All right, thanks, guys. Let's go over now to Jessica. And we have tornado damage, certainly in Orleans Parish, some other parishes, but FEMA is saying no public assistance.
FEMA is saying no public assistance, and it's important to know the difference between public assistance and individual assistance. Public assistance essentially allows the parish governments to be reimbursed for the cost of cleanup that they incurred. Individual assistance is what we all sort of are familiar with, which is the disaster food stamp, the temporary housing, that type of thing. Now, New Orleans did get individual assistance, but it did not qualify for public assistance. In fact, no state in Louisiana qualified for public assistance. No parish in Louisiana qualified for public assistance, despite the damage that the tornado did cause. Now, Governor Edwards has said he's going to appeal that ruling, and he has 30 days to do so. But in terms of the parishes that also applied for not only public assistance, but individual assistance and also didn't get it, Ascension, St. Tammany, and St. James. So they will not, their parish governments won't receive any help, and neither will their residents who had been affected by the storm.
The Jefferson, also for public assistance. So, as you say, 30 days to appeal was certainly looking, particularly in Orleans. Yes, it is just a 2-mile swath, but it's serious damage there.
It's serious damage. I mean, I had the opportunity to go through and to talk to some of the people that are affected. You're really seeing homes with roofs ripped off. People's homes really just look completely devastated. Trailers turned over into streets, trucks just completely overturned. It's a serious situation, and a lot of people, while they're grateful for the individual assistance that they're able to get, the city is going to have to incur some costs in the cleanup for that.
And the city, of course, is always saying, we have no money. So it's really going to hurt to incur these extra costs.
It's going to be a burden for sure. And they've committed to continuing to clean up. In fact, just this week, they announced that they were going to do a 4th tornado pass for debris. So they're committed to continuing to do it despite getting no reimbursement from the federal government for doing so.
Do we know why they rejected this?
Apparently there's a sort of a bar that you have to meet, that you have to clear. And whereas for Katrina, we really saw widespread devastation that covered the entire city. Again, this is only a 2-mile stretch in which, you know, workers from the city's Department of Parks and Parkways are just having to go in, clear out the area, make sure that the roads are passable. And apparently it was not enough that FEMA thought that we needed extra help just for that 2-mile stretch.
So in 30 days, the governor can appeal. Is there any kind of track record? I mean, generally, will FEMA, is there a good chance it's going to change its mind and give us the assistance?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, obviously this is a new administration, and it's not quite sure, we're not quite sure what that means yet. Obviously for Katrina, it was a different disaster, and I think it's too important to note that every disaster is different. While we did get public assistance for some of the flooding, and we did get individual assistance for some of the flooding, this tornado, which we had significant damage in New Orleans, we did not.
Okay. All right, Jessica, thanks a lot. We're going to go over to Mike right now. And you did a piece about a week or so ago, taking a look at how the incidence of crime and the increase in the rates of crime has a direct relation to the number of police on the streets.
Right. It was actually a series of stories that we called the Big Uneasy, a city under fire. And we've seen in 2017 a spike in almost all crime categories: armed robbery, shootings, murder. And what I've been tracking for some time is the correlation between the number of police officers on the force and on the street to those crime statistics. We now have a long enough track record to really look at that correlation in a way that is statistically sound. And in many ways it's stating the obvious, but it's quite clear that perhaps the biggest contributing factor to the crime situation, really starting over the last 6 months of 2016 and into the start of this year, is the lack of police officers in the street. And the way that works is, obviously, there's the visibility of officers patrolling neighborhoods, but we looked at categories such as drug arrests, way down, more than 50% if you just go back to 2010, gun arrests, again, down 40 to 50%, and even things that would seem sort of minor compared to, major violent crime, curfew violations, traffic tickets, all way down. And law enforcement professionals, criminologists will all tell you that by making those arrests, especially drug and gun cases, you will prevent shootings and killings down the road. Those are the people who ultimately, armed and in the drug game, will be the biggest targets and perhaps perpetrators of shootings and killings. And just like, pulling over cars, you can find guns, illegal guns, people on parole, probation, violators, and prevent some of the bigger crimes before they happen. The NOPD just does not have that presence, and we look back to when Mitch Landrieu took office, the police force was about 1,500 officers. They're now down to about 1,150. So significantly down, and we looked at the graphs of the decline in officers and the decline in those categories: gun, drugs, traffic stops, and they're all almost matched, like mirror images.
So,
But is there the money to hire them, though?
Well, there is money set aside that, unfortunately, this police department and city can't hire enough officers fast enough, number one, to make the 150 goal that they keep, setting for themselves the past couple of years and setting aside the money to train 150 officers. They got to 109 last year. The probably bigger problem is the attrition. We hired 109 last year out of 150 that were budgeted, but we lost 104. So the net gain was only 5 officers over an entire year. That will be a glacial pace to bring the force up to the 1,500 that it was, much less some of the loftier goals that have been established.
So we're seeing increased rates in shootings and then also in murders so far this year. So that would, and an increase in crime, that sort of indicates that those who want to commit the crimes realize that the cops aren't there to stop them.
Well, in looking at this, obviously the statistics tell you a great deal, the experts tell you a great deal, and as well as the police department. I went ahead just using a little different approach and went to the street, found someone who's been a drug dealer, pretty high level, has pulled robberies, has done prison time, and knows the street extremely well, and basically got a guided tour from our anonymous drug dealer, and he was able to, at 11 a.m. in the morning, point out major drug deals going down, major dealers, and somewhat unnerving police officers. It was mostly in Central City, right over by the 6th District Police Station, just driving right by major stash houses, shooting galleries, and the feeling on the street is that the police officers who are, as you might recall, with The Advocate, WWL-TV did the major series called NOPD Call Waiting, which has highlighted the extremely long response times to 911 calls. So there's been such an intense focus on rushing to those 911 calls that they don't have time for the proactive patrols, just keeping an eye on street corner drug dealing, even responding to calls for that. One of the casualties of the manpower crunch has been the disbanding of district narcotics units, specifically targeting drug calls. They're now folded into the general investigations of burglaries and everything else. So if you cannot, and again, we saw it with our own eyes, and we actually put some of this on TV, major open-air drug deals going down on a street corner in all neighborhoods of the city.
So not a problem that's going to be easily solved, because we just aren't seeing the number of police officers increase. It's just a real challenge to increase those ranks.
Last year was sort of the test year in which they pulled out all the stops. They did national recruiting, tried to bring in military, and to get into the into the black, +5 for the year, it took, cobbling together an academy class of 10 recruits on virtually the very last day of the year, just to get into black. So that's the challenge.
Are we competitive with the benefits that we offer police?
Pension good, benefits good, pay does not match the cities like Dallas, San Antonio, Atlanta, and some of our competitors now, because what has happened nationwide is fewer and fewer people want to go into police work. And so there's a major, lack of the recruits, going into the profession, and now we're competing nationally with cities that pay a lot more.
Okay. All right, Mike. Well, continue to be a challenge and an issue. Thanks a lot. Over to Steph now. And we were talking about FEMA and them saying they're not going to give the public assistance money to the tornado-affected parishes. Yeah. But we might have somebody who really knows what the state of Louisiana experiences in there. Maybe. I mean, he's on the list.
He's on the list. Jessica mentioned that we don't really know what's going on with this new administration. And frankly, it's a little hard to tell still how decisions are being made on appointments. But a name emerged as a possible administrator for FEMA that I think a lot of people in Louisiana are pretty excited about, and that's Paul Rainwater. He is someone who he was a National Guardsman and an Army vet, but more importantly, he is someone who worked in the Louisiana Recovery Authority, then led it. He worked for Bobby Jindal as Chief of Staff Commissioner of Administration. He worked for Kathleen Blanco, Mary Landrieu, so he has fans in both parties, and he is someone who just knows this area very, very well and has dealt with it a lot. Here on the ground in Louisiana, and now he's actually a lobbyist helping the state try to get some of that flood money. So he knows, he's handled the immediate disasters and the kind of long trek through rebuilding, which is so bureaucratic and so driven by regulations, and is just so frustrating to people who are waiting to act, and there are these built-in waiting periods and these hoops you have to jump through. So his name has emerged as a possibility for this job, as to be head of FEMA. He would replace Craig Fugate, who's someone who is kind of in the same mold. He is, again, bipartisan background. He had been in charge of emergency response for Republican Governor Jeb Bush in Florida before he joined the Obama administration, and stayed for 8 years, and was a very familiar face to those of us who cover disasters here. He was here all the time. And, just someone who is very, who understands the issues very well. And kind of a contrast with, there's the Michael Brown model,
Right.
which might be more of what we're seeing elsewhere in the Trump administration. Someone who doesn't have a background in the relevant area. We're actually seeing quite a lot of that out of this administration.
But some of the other folks on the list do have some
Some of them do.
experience.
There are some other people who've worked in disasters. There's former Governor Pat McCrory of North Carolina. There's John Fleming's on the list. John Fleming, the former congressman from North Louisiana, who's kind of out of the Tea Party area. The two senators in Louisiana are pushing rainwater, I should say, including John Kennedy, who, it's interesting, fought with every one of Paul Rainwater's bosses, Republican and Democrat, but he really likes this guy and is pushing
So
him.
when will this election be made? Do we know?
We have no idea.
Okay, so we keep our fingers crossed
Yes.
for someone from Louisiana who knows our issues and
Yes,
knows
because
about
there's
emergency
not a big
management
margin for error
and
in these
disaster
areas, as we all know.
management. Okay, thanks a lot, Steph.
What a great name for a FEMA director. Huh?
Rainwater, exactly. Flooding.
Okay, over to Jessica right now, and there is some progress now in the redevelopment of the GUST project, of the GUST housing. That's what, phase 3 of it.
Phase 3. So phase 1 and 2 were built in 2008 and 2012. Phase 3 had been stalled for quite some time, to the dismay of a lot of the surrounding residents, because the contractor that Hanno hired to move forward with the project just missed every deadline that they were set up to achieve. So Hanno tried to recoup, get the ball rolling on the project by asking the bonding company that was supposed to complete it, if the company did not, the other company did not, to move forward with it. That bonding company then, in turn, hired the same company that did not achieve the intended outcome. And so we've really been dancing with this for about 2 years now. And now they finally have hired a new contractor. They've got a couple of units already renovated. They've got about 91 more to go. And they hope to have it complete and work ongoing over the next year.
So will 91 be the whole total for this phase?
The whole total for this phase is about 155, and they've got two contracts that they are scheduled to vote on relatively soon that would total about 91, and then it would leave left behind about 35 of the 155.
Jessica, what are you hearing about these housing developments? Are certainly attractive. I mean, when you drive by, what do you hear? Are they working okay? Are people happy there? Or, I mean, do they seem to be doing what they were intended to do, and that is to be less dense and give people a better chance at living a decent life?
Well, what they were set up to do was to be a mixed income model compared to what they were before Katrina, which is everyone that lived there was under public housing. With this new model, this 155 unit, it's going to be some public housing, but it's also going to be some tenants who qualify under the low income housing tax credit program, which you would have to have a little bit higher of an income than would a public housing resident. So it's a mix of tenants as opposed to all one income of tenants concentrated together.
And some market rate, right?
Actually, not in this one. Not in this one, but in other ones that Hanno has
Yeah.
done, such as Bienville Basin, the former Iberville project, that was market rate mixed in with low tax credits and public housing.
And then the equivalency vouchers, Section 8, will also be part
Yes,
of the GUST
a small
housing.
contingent of them will also be vouchers, people who receive vouchers to live there.
Okay, so when do we think this will indeed be finished?
Well, they've got work underway right now. They were scheduled to award the 41 and the 49 units to two separate contractors this week. However, they canceled their board meeting because they didn't have a quorum because of Mardi Gras. So we'll see. We'll see. Well, hopefully that'll be. We'll see more work on it this year.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jessica. Okay, Carnival 2017 is over and done with. How was it?
Overall, it was very successful. Even the weather cooperated. The only day of significance in which the weather was really bad was 12th night. That was a cold and rainy night. But once you got into the parade season, other than that first Friday night, I mean, the weather was really good by Mardi Gras, so that was amazing. I don't think people realize what an unbelievable thing New Orleans does to host so many people out in the streets for so many nights in a row, maybe like 1 million people each night for 4 or 5 nights in relative peace. And to me, this is how cities should work, where you have people out together dancing and celebrating and camping out. And so I think New Orleans does all of that. The one, negative thing, it was just one person, was the driving incident at Endymion when this man crashed into a crowd. This could have had a high potential for being a global story of monumental proportions. And I give the police chief a lot of credit for being comfortable at quickly saying that it appears that this man was inebriated several times, because otherwise the world would have thought this looked too much like Nice at the beginning. Okay, it looked just like the same sort of thing, somebody driving in to a crowd. The initial reports were like hitting 20 people. We didn't know if they were all killed, and so it could have looked very much like a terrorist incident. So once it was reported, I think the media and the police chief did a good job of really allaying some of the horror of it, at least by knowing that nobody was killed, and that by that night that there were only 3 people left in the hospital. And to lay out the fact that it was alcoholism was a lot different than what we might have suspected. The emergency people did a good job. And I also think that there was some question about whether or not they should have allowed the parade to continue. I think he did the right thing by allowing the parade. I mean, what would it have done to have stopped the parade? Would have sent a signal that maybe it's a terrorist incident out there. Would have caused a lot more traffic, and so I think that was good too. And so it was bad, but I think it was handled well.
You wrote in Muses. What was your feeling for this Mardi Gras?
Huge crowds, very beautiful weather. It was great. It was really nice. The crowds, they do seem to just get bigger and bigger every year. It's kind of the perspective from the top of the float.
Such a beautiful
So we're
night.
sorry we couldn't get everything to everybody. We really are.
I think it might be happening. We don't know for sure yet. But it looks like that by Monday and Tuesday, the crowds may have been down a little bit. I mean, not significant. But what might be happening is that there were so much crowds on those 3 days before that might be affecting it. But Mike, in terms of the police along St. Charles, there are spots where bad things have happened in the past. And of course, the police know where those spots are. And you saw police in clusters with those radiant yellow vests on that said police. And so there, along St. Charles, they did a very good job of making the police. You had no doubt that there was a police presence there.
That's right, and of course there's also presence of officers who you don't know are officers because they're undercover. You know, for all the problems the police department has, even with manpower, this is one thing they get right year in and year out, studied around the world for being able to control crowds of this size.
So it's great. We had a wonderful, peaceful, for the most part, successful Mardi Gras with great weather. Okay, time to look ahead.
Well, yet another sign that the world is going to be a better place to live is that today, the world's greatest snowball stand, Hanson's, open for the season today. It'll be open every day from 1 to 7 p.m. except Monday.
Yay, it's snowball time. Mike.
Yeah, not so much looking ahead, but looking back. Today, in my newsroom at WWL-TV, we had the going away celebration for Bill Capo, one of the TV legends here. And then next week, it'll be Mike Haas, another broadcast lion. And very sad to see both those guys go. They're absolute consummate professionals.
Or a broadcast moose, because that's always his costume for Mardi Gras. Jessica.
Keep an eye out on the City Council, because as it heads into this next election season, they're going to try to wrap up a lot of things that they had been working on for quite some time, such as their moves around affordable housing. So we'll be keeping a close eye on them in the next couple months.
Okay, great. Steph.
Okay. Up in Baton Rouge, Governor John Bel Edwards ran, one of his issues was reducing incarceration in Louisiana. There's a task force putting together ideas. They'll come out with a report in a couple of weeks, and look for this to be a big issue in the upcoming special session.
Which begins?
Regular session, which begins in April.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks a lot, you guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, we want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod & Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.